When I first moved into my little brick townhouse in Denver, I was excited but also nervous. I had spent years in a noisy apartment building downtown, where neighbors came and went without so much as a hello. I craved something quieter, more permanent, a place where people actually knew each other. But in the first 2 weeks, I barely saw anyone except the mail carrier. The houses were neat, lawns trimmed, cars parked in driveways, but the people? Mostly hidden behind curtains. Except for one man. Every morning, as I left for work, my next-door neighbor was outside tending to his yard. He was probably mid-30s, tall, with an easy but reserved smile. He'd nod politely whenever I walked by, sometimes raising a hand in greeting, but never more than that. I learned his name from the mailbox. Daniel Hartman. After another week of polite nods and silent evenings, I decided I was tired of waiting. If I wanted a real sense of community, I had to start it myself. "Why don't you just invite him over?" my best friend Claire suggested over the phone. "Invite him? Like to dinner?" I asked, surprised. "Why not? You're a great cook, and it's a good way to break the ice. What's the worst that could happen?" I pictured awkward silences, burnt food, or him politely declining. But I also pictured laughter, maybe even friendship. And honestly, the second picture won. So that Friday evening, as Daniel was trimming the hedge between our houses, I walked over. "Hi," I began nervously. "I was wondering, would you like to come over for dinner tomorrow? Just something simple." I figured it'd be nice to finally talk. For a moment, he looked surprised. Then he smiled. "Dinner? That actually sounds great. What time?" I exhaled with relief. 7. The next day, I cleaned the house as though I were preparing for a royal guest. I vacuumed, dusted, even rearranged the flowers on my table. Cooking helped calm my nerves. I decided on a menu: roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, and a simple salad. For dessert, I baked an apple pie, hoping the smell would make the whole place feel warm and welcoming. By 6:30, the house smelled incredible. At 6:50, I set the table with my nicest dishes, even lighting a candle or two. At exactly 7, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Daniel stood there holding a bottle of wine and a basket of fresh bread. "Hi," he said with a smile. I wasn't sure what to bring, so I stopped by a bakery. "That's perfect," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." Inside, he glanced around.
Wow.
"Your place looks great. Cozy." "Thanks. I'm still settling in." We sat down at the table, and for a moment, silence lingered. Then Daniel broke it with a laugh. "I have to admit, I wasn't expecting a dinner invitation when I moved here. Usually, neighbors just wave and leave it at that." "Same," I confessed. "But I figured, why not? Might as well know the people who live around me." As we ate, conversation started slowly, then grew easier. Daniel told me he was an architect who mostly worked from home. He had lived in the neighborhood for 5 years, but most of the neighbors kept to themselves. "What about you?" he asked. I told him about my job as a project manager at a marketing firm and how I'd been craving a quieter life outside the bustle of downtown. "So you're the brave one," he said with a grin. "The one who finally decided to knock down the invisible walls around here." I laughed. "Or the crazy one. We'll see how this dinner goes before we decide." The best part of the evening was discovering how many surprising stories Daniel had. Like the time he traveled to Italy to study old architecture and accidentally got locked inside a historic church overnight. Or the time he built a treehouse for his niece that was so elaborate the neighbors thought it was a guest house. "You're kidding," I said, laughing. "A guest house?" He shook his head. "It even had running water. My niece called it her castle." His storytelling was animated, full of little details, and I found myself leaning in, eager for more. After dinner, I brought out the apple pie. Daniel took one bite and closed his eyes. "This," he said dramatically, "is the best pie I've ever had." "Flattery will get you more slices," I teased. We both laughed, and for the first time since I'd moved in, the house felt alive with conversation and warmth. As the night wore on, the awkwardness disappeared completely. It didn't feel like entertaining a stranger. It felt like talking to an old friend I'd somehow known forever. When the dishes were cleared, Daniel suggested a short walk. "The night's too nice to end just yet," he said. So we strolled down the quiet street. The air was crisp, stars faint above the city glow. We passed other houses with their warm lights shining through curtains, families inside, dogs barking in backyards. "This neighborhood has potential," Daniel said softly. "If more people took the time to reach out like you did tonight, it could really feel like a community." I nodded. "Maybe this is the start." He looked at me, his eyes kind. "I think it is." When we returned, it was nearly midnight. I hadn't realized how much time had passed. "Thank you," Daniel said at my door. "For the invitation. For the food. For making me feel like I belong." I smiled, touched by his words. "You do belong. We all do. We just forget to remind each other sometimes." He nodded, then grinned. "So, when's the next dinner?" I laughed. "We'll see. Maybe next time you cook." "Deal." Over the next few weeks, Daniel and I started a tradition. Sometimes I'd cook, sometimes he would. Sometimes we'd just share coffee on our porches, talking about everything from books to weekend plans. Other neighbors began to notice. Soon, Mrs. Jensen from across the street brought over cookies. Then the couple 2 houses down invited us to a barbecue. And just like that, what started with one simple dinner turned into something bigger, a neighborhood that finally felt like home. Inviting my neighbor to dinner wasn't just about breaking the ice. It was about opening a door. And when Daniel stepped through it, he brought more than conversation. He brought the reminder that kindness, no matter how small, can change everything.